And you, Mrs. Hamilton, I know just how much that means to you.
Clark Gable didn't become a 5 times married king of Hollywood without stepping on a few people on his way up. As the foremost leading man of Golden Age Hollywood, the world knows Gable best as Rhett Butler from Gone with the Wind. But to those close to him, his legacy was much more complicated. Was he a charming womanizer with a heart of gold? Or was there a darker side to him? And there's a lingering question that has sparked curiosity for years. Was Clark Gable part black? Are the rumors true? Keep watching to uncover the truth and discover more intriguing details about the man behind the myth. Before diving into these rumors, let's first take a moment to look at the early events that shaped Clark Gable and influenced the decisions he made throughout his life. Clark Gable's beginnings were marked by a series of unfortunate events that would shape his early years. Born in Cadiz, Ohio in 1901, Gable's arrival was fraught with complications. His birth certificate, a chaotic mess due to his doctor's illegible handwriting, ended up listing his gender as both male and female. Just as the tumult of his birth seemed to settle, tragedy struck again. At only 10 months old, Gable's mother passed away suddenly, leaving him without the nurturing care he desperately needed. When Gable was just 2 years old, his father remarried. While many might assume that a stepmother could spell trouble, Gable's new stepmother, Jenny Dunlap, had a profoundly positive influence on his life. Jenny took it upon herself to ensure that Gable received a good education, always dressed well, and maintained a refined appearance. Her influence extended beyond just the practical. She introduced him to the works of Shakespeare, igniting in him a lasting love for literature and the arts. This early exposure to culture and education played a crucial role in shaping the man who would go on to become a Hollywood legend. As Jenny Dunlap diligently shaped Clark Gable into a refined gentleman, his father focused on instilling a different set of values. He encouraged Gable to engage in macho pursuits like hunting and physical labor. Despite this influence, Gable harbored a different passion: acting. Clark Gable's passion for acting ignited when he was just 17, but his path was far from smooth. Financial difficulties plagued his family, adding to the strain of his teenage years. Tragedy struck when he was 19, with the untimely death of his cherished stepmother, Jenny Dunlap, who passed away at just 46. Grieving and still in his teens, Gable took a job in the oil fields alongside his father to make ends meet, but his dreams of acting never waned. Determined to pursue his passion, Gable left his father behind and ventured to the Pacific Northwest, where he took on various odd jobs. It was during this period that a co-worker, recognizing his potential, encouraged him to give acting another shot. This same co-worker introduced him to Franz Dorfler, a talented actress who would soon become his fiancée. Together, they joined a traveling theater group, but their partnership faced challenges. Their journey led them to Portland, Oregon, where Dorfler introduced Gable to Josephine Dillon, a local acting coach. What initially seemed like a promising opportunity soon took a complicated turn. Dillon, who was significantly older than Gable, not only provided professional guidance in voice, diction, and physical control, but also began to pay his bills. Before long, Gable's relationship with Dillon deepened beyond the professional sphere. He left his fiancée for Dillon, who was 17 years his senior. At this point, Gable was still far from being a star, and his new relationship with Dillon marked a tumultuous chapter in his life. Did they live happily ever after? Not quite. After years of carefully preparing Clark Gable for a Hollywood career, Josephine Dillon deemed him ready for the big screen. She relocated to Los Angeles to establish a theater company, providing him with a crucial stepping stone. 5 months later, Gable joined her and they married, conveniently adjusting their ages on the marriage certificate to reflect a more acceptable 10-year difference. Dillon had imparted significant skills to Gable, and he was soon ready to put her lessons into action. However, the manner in which he did so was far from conventional. In the early stages of his film career, Gable harbored a well-guarded secret. The mentorship that had launched him into Hollywood was a pattern he would repeat. To advance his career, Gable engaged in numerous extramarital affairs, seeking favors from influential figures. Among his notable liaisons were star William Haynes and wealthy actress Pauline Frederick. Frederick not only cast him in her play, but also gifted him a car. This behavior was just the beginning of Gable's scandalous reputation as a playboy. His serial dalliances eventually took their toll on his marriage to Dylan, leading to their separation in 1929. Undeterred, Gable continued his relentless pursuit of fame and success. He secured his first film contract with Path Pictures and found yet another wealthy older woman, Maria Langham, a heiress whom he pursued with characteristic charm. Their age difference? A striking 17 years. It's clear Gable had a well-defined type. Just days after finalizing his divorce from his first wife, Clark Gable married Maria Langham. Initially, he seemed to have put his wandering eyes behind him, but it wasn't long before the allure of Hollywood starlets beckoned once more. His new film contract with Warner Brothers, a major studio, meant more opportunities to encounter glamorous actresses. However, not all of these encounters went smoothly. In 1931, Gable appeared opposite the illustrious Greta Garbo, who was already a major star. Garbo, unimpressed with Gable's performance, dismissed him as a bad actor and considered him a snob. This disdain wasn't limited to Garbo. Gable also made enemies within the industry. Warner Brothers had high hopes for Gable, but he failed to win over one of the studio's key figures. Darryl F. Zanuck, a powerful studio executive, was particularly harsh, critiquing Gable with a scathing remark. "His ears are too big and he looks like an ape." It seemed Gable's career might face another lengthy period of struggle, but fortune had a way of intervening. MGM, eager to bolster its roster of leading men, recognized Gable's potential and signed him to their roster. This marked a pivotal turning point in his career. One of his first major roles was in Dance, Fools, Dance, where he starred opposite Joan Crawford. Crawford, a formidable figure in Hollywood, had specifically requested Gable as her leading man. Known for her rule of not engaging romantically with co-stars until after they had made at least 3 films together, Crawford notably broke her own guideline for Gable. The passionate affair between Clark Gable and Joan Crawford never spiraled into a dramatic breakup, despite their numerous on-set rendezvous. Over their careers, they starred in a total of 8 films together. Their chemistry was undeniable, even though it often blurred the lines between their professional and personal lives. MGM studio head Louis B. Mayer did his best to curb their scandalous behavior, but he couldn't deny their magnetic on-screen presence. However, it was Gable's chemistry with another actress that truly catapulted him to stardom. In 1931, Gable played a gangster in A Free Soul, where his character seduces Norma Shearer's role, and the performance stirred audiences into a frenzy. The film's most notorious scene, where Gable's character violently shoves his love interest, became a fan favorite, much to the studio's alarm. The overwhelming positive response to Gable's performance didn't go unnoticed, and MGM began to recognize his rising star power. Gable became one of the studio's top actors, appearing alongside the era's most famous starlets, including Joan Crawford. Their turbulent affair continued unabated, despite both being married to other people. The media buzz around their relationship was intense, with one gossip columnist dubbing it the affair that nearly burned Hollywood down. Eventually, the scandal reached a boiling point for Mayer, who threatened to fire both Gable and Crawford. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Gable decided it was time to shift his focus elsewhere. Despite still being married to his older wife, Maria Langham, Clark Gable's affair with Joan Crawford came to an end, only for him to quickly find solace with another starlet. Gable embarked on a brief fling with Marion Davies, a popular actress and the longtime mistress of Hollywood mogul Herman J. Mankiewicz. Their dalliance seemed to tick all the boxes for a classic 6 Degrees of Old Hollywood affairs game. However, Gable's romance with Davies was short-lived, and soon he was poised to enter a far more significant relationship. For the film Red Dust in 1932, Crawford was initially cast as Gable's leading lady, but MGM studio head Louis B. Mayer, eager to quell the scandal surrounding their affair, replaced her with the stunning Jean Harlow. Mayer's decision proved to be a stroke of genius. Gable and Harlow shared undeniable on-screen chemistry, and audiences were thrilled by their dynamic. Behind the scenes, though, Mayer faced a crisis. During the filming of Red Dust, a tragedy struck. Harlow's husband took his own life during a break from production. The circumstances surrounding his death were highly suspicious, leading to wild speculation. Some suspected that Harlow might have been involved, while others were puzzled by a peculiar line in his suicide note. The scandal was a significant blow to Mayer, who was already grappling with the controversy. Despite his initial plans to recast Harlow's role, the overwhelming sympathy for the grieving actress forced him to reconsider. Unfortunately, the tragedy continued to cast a long shadow over the production. During this period, Clark Gable found himself in a frustrating situation. MGM had several films in development, but none of them piqued his interest. Despite being paid $2,000 a week, Gable was essentially idle, waiting for a role that excited him. Louis B. Mayer, ever the problem solver, had a plan. He arranged for Gable to be loaned out to another studio for a romantic comedy called It Happened One Night. This film would end up catapulting Gable to unparalleled stardom. The path to success, however, was far from smooth. The script for It Happened One Night had been rejected by numerous Hollywood heavyweights, and director Frank Capra initially had little faith in Gable's suitability for the role. The filming experience was fraught with difficulties, and both Gable and his co-star, Claudette Colbert, were eager to move on from it. When the film premiered, it didn't make an immediate splash. However, over time, it began to gain traction and won over audiences. Even when It Happened One Night and its two leads received Oscar nominations, there was lingering skepticism. Colbert, in particular, showed her disdain by not attending the ceremony, needing an aide to drag her off a train when she won. Despite these setbacks, the film became an enduring success and proved to be a transformative moment in Clark Gable's career. Clark Gable's win for Best Actor at the Academy Awards for It Happened One Night was a deeply emotional moment. After more than a decade of struggling to gain recognition in Hollywood, Gable finally achieved the acclaim he had worked so hard for. His reaction was touching and heartfelt. When a young fan admired his Oscar, Gable handed it over to the child, emphasizing that the honor itself was more meaningful to him than the trophy. His gesture was so moving that it left many, including himself, in tears. The success of It Happened One Night also had an unexpected side effect. During a scene where Gable's character undressed, he struggled with the undershirt and keeping the scene flowing smoothly. To solve the problem, the wardrobe department decided to eliminate the undershirt altogether. This small change sparked a major trend among men and led to a significant drop in undershirt sales. Fortunately, the fashion world would later see a resurgence with films like A Streetcar Named Desire. In 1937, Gable reunited with his old friend Jean Harlow for the film Saratoga. However, their time on set quickly turned distressing. Harlow's health took a sudden and mysterious downturn. She was often so frail that Gable had to support her physically between takes. But when Gable went to visit her in hospital, he was in for a shock. When Clark Gable visited Jean Harlow in the hospital, his heart was shattered. His old friend and co-star looked unrecognizable, severely bloated and with a distressing odor of urine on her breath. The doctors delivered the grim news. Harlow was in the early stages of kidney failure. Tragically, she passed away soon after, at just 26 years old. The loss was a heavy blow to Gable, but the sorrow didn't end there. With Harlow's death occurring when the film was 90% complete, the studio insisted on finishing it. Gable, deeply affected by her loss, found it difficult to perform without her presence. Filming scenes with either her body double or alone, he described the experience as being in the arms of a ghost. Despite the somber circumstances, Harlow's devoted fans flocked to theaters to see her final performance, and the film turned into a massive success. Gable's on-screen charisma was undeniable. He could create chemistry with virtually anyone. However, his off-screen behavior often mirrored his on-screen allure, despite his marriage to Maria Langham. When he starred alongside Carole Lombard in No Man of Her Own, he managed to maintain a surprising distance. Lombard, aware of his notorious reputation, was taken aback by his restraint. She remarked, "We did all kinds of hot love scenes, and I never got any kind of tremble out of him at all." Was Gable genuinely unaffected, or was he concealing his true feelings? Years later, Gable and Lombard would meet again, but this time the sparks were undeniable. At a glamorous ball, Gable wasted no time making his intentions clear. He boldly invited Lombard to his hotel room. Lombard's response was both sharp and unforgettable. "Who do you think you are, Clark Gable?" Despite her cheeky retort, the chemistry between them was undeniable, and they quickly became inseparable. Gable's first two marriages were strategic, more about personal gain than true romance. His early unions were with wealthy women who could offer him the support he needed to climb the Hollywood ladder. But after winning the Oscar, Gable was no longer in need of that kind of help. Still, he didn't want to disrupt his newfound success with a public divorce, so he and his second wife decided to put their separation agreement on hold, allowing their marriage to linger as a formality while he basked in the glow of his victory. Lombard had a profound influence on Gable, both personally and professionally. When the film adaptation of Margaret Mitchell's best-selling novel, Gone with the Wind, was being cast, every major star in Hollywood was eager for a role. However, Gable wasn't initially interested. It was Lombard who had read the book and was eager to portray Scarlett O'Hara, who handed him a copy. Gable, embodying his typical macho demeanor, dismissed the story as a women's picture. Yet, as history shows, this was far from the end of their story. Gable and Lombard made no effort to hide their romance, and their relationship quickly became the talk of Hollywood. But not everyone was pleased. Gable's second wife, Maria Langham, had always anticipated that Gable might stray, given his history of affairs. Yet this time was different. Langham wasn't willing to just fade into the background. The tabloids were quick to paint her as the villain in the love triangle, casting Gable and Lombard as the star-crossed lovers. Langham, who had stood by Gable through the tumultuous early years of his career, wasn't ready to let go now that he had risen to become the world's biggest movie star. The idea of an expensive divorce settlement didn't sit well with her, especially when Gable pushed her to finalize the divorce, which only fueled her anger. MGM, eager to avoid further scandal and keep their star's image pristine, saw an opportunity in the situation. The studio came up with a clever strategy. If Gable agreed to take on the role of Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, they would offer him a compensation package so lucrative that it would make the costly divorce settlement seem insignificant. It was a win-win for MGM and Gable, but not for Langham. Determined to make things difficult, Langham filed for divorce in California, complicating Gable's plans to marry Lombard immediately. But eventually, Langham relented, and the courts granted the divorce. With the ink barely dry on the divorce papers, Gable wasted no time. During a break in the filming of Gone with the Wind, he married Lombard, just 13 days after his divorce was finalized. With Lombard by his side, Gable felt free to truly be himself. They shared a deep bond, often laughing together and playing pranks on each other. They had similar tastes and interests. While Lombard was familiar with the glitz and glamour of Hollywood parties, she also enjoyed getting her hands dirty, whether in the stables with Gable or accompanying him on hunting trips. They seemed like the perfect match, but as with many fairy tales, theirs was not destined for a flawless ending. Gable had his reservations about taking on the role of Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, but once he began filming, he realized he was indeed a perfect fit for the part. From the moment he stepped on set, he felt the camaraderie and excitement of working with such a talented cast. What could have been a grueling experience filming a 4-hour epic turned into a joyous and memorable adventure for everyone involved. It was, for once, pure, exhilarating fun. Long before George Clooney and modern-day pranksters, Clark Gable was known for his playful antics on set. During the filming of Gone with the Wind, he met his match in Olivia de Havilland. In one memorable scene where Gable was supposed to carry de Havilland's character, she had a clever trick up her sleeve. The crew secured her to the set, making it look like Gable was struggling to lift her, causing him to nearly throw out his back in the process. Despite the playful pranks and light-hearted moments, the film's production was not without its challenges. On the set of Gone with the Wind, Clark Gable was in his element. Despite a rocky start with an initial director who was later dismissed, Gable quickly built strong relationships with his co-stars, particularly with Hattie McDaniel. True to his playful nature, Gable decided to pull one of his classic pranks on McDaniel during a scene celebrating the birth of Rhett and Scarlett's child. He secretly swapped her usual tea with a stiff drink. McDaniel didn't catch on until it was too late, adding a touch of mischief to their camaraderie. However, not everyone on set treated McDaniel with the same warmth. When Gable first arrived on set, he was immediately struck by the segregated bathrooms, a glaring reminder of the racial divisions of the time. Furious, he demanded that the producer rectify the situation or risk losing him as Rhett Butler. His protest led to a change in the set's facilities, though the battle was far from over. The premiere of Gone with the Wind was planned as a grand affair in Atlanta, a city still deeply segregated. When Gable learned of the premiere's location, he was appalled, realizing that McDaniel, who had won an Oscar for her role, would be excluded from this momentous occasion. When Gable realized that McDaniel wouldn't be able to attend, his reaction was chilling. Gable was so infuriated by the studio's mistreatment of McDaniel that he vowed to boycott the premiere. Despite his protest, McDaniel pleaded with him to attend, and Gable complied. He was filled with pride as McDaniel won the Academy Award for her role. Their friendship endured throughout their lives, but not every Oscar moment was as joyful for Gable. Nominated for Best Actor for his role in Gone with the Wind, Gable was hopeful for a win. Despite the film's numerous awards, he didn't take home the trophy. Lombard, always ready with her own brand of humor, tried to comfort him by saying, "Don't worry, Pappy. We'll bring one home next year." Gable, thinking this might be his last shot at an Oscar, was surprised when Lombard's response was more about herself than him. "Not you, you self-centered bleep. I meant me," she quipped. Classic Lombard. Unfortunately, the happiness was short-lived. By 1941, many Hollywood stars, including Lombard, were deeply involved in the war effort. Lombard's enthusiasm was so great that she even wrote to the president volunteering Gable for active duty. The president replied, suggesting their efforts would be more valuable on the home front. Lombard then dedicated herself to organizing and participating in bond drives, but her busy schedule was overshadowed by impending tragedy. In January 1942, Carol Lombard was in her home state of Indiana for a bond drive. As she was returning to Los Angeles with her mother and press agent, tragedy struck. Her plane crashed, killing everyone on board. When Clark Gable heard the news, he rushed to the crash site in Nevada. His reaction was profoundly heartbreaking. Gable had to be held back by friends from climbing the mountain where the crash occurred. When the search team finally found Lombard's body, he wept uncontrollably and said, "Oh God, I don't want to go back to an empty house." He continued to live in the Encino home they had shared for the rest of his life. While Gable moved on publicly, his heart remained with Lombard. After Lombard's death, Gable, who had been encouraged by her to enlist, finally joined the United States Air Force. He flew a plane equipped with a camera to film aerial gunners in action and participated in 5 missions, but he also caught the attention of the enemy. It turns out that Adolf Hitler was a huge admirer of Clark Gable. When he learned that Gable was fighting with the Allies, he even put a bounty on Gable's safe capture. Despite this, Gable came through unscathed and was honored by the U.S. for his service. After returning home, he took a brief rest before diving back into his career and personal life. Upon his return, Gable found solace in the company of actress Virginia Gray. They had a tumultuous on-again, off-again relationship before his marriage to Lombard, and their renewed closeness sparked rumors that Gray might become his 4th wife. However, the tabloids were in for a shock. Throughout the 1940s, Gray waited patiently for a proposal from Gable, even as he was involved with other women. Then, in a stunning twist, Gable abruptly married Lady Sylvia Ashley in 1949. The news left Gray devastated and surprised many, including Gable's own friends. When Gable called a friend to help arrange a private wedding ceremony, the friend responded with, "Sylvia who?" The marriage didn't start off well, and it certainly didn't end on a high note. Lady Sylvia Ashley was a world away from Carole Lombard. Where Lombard was down-to-earth and shared Gable's interests, Ashley was a lavish spender who thrived on Hollywood's high society scene and had no interest in Gable's hobbies. Their differences soon began to take a toll, and shortly after their first anniversary, Gable demanded a divorce. Ashley was devastated, but Gable seemed more than ready to move on. He wasted no time in ending the marriage. After Ashley tearfully testified at their divorce hearing, Gable confided to friends that he must have been drunk when he proposed. The finalization of the divorce left him visibly relieved, but his restlessness extended beyond his personal life. Following his iconic role in Gone with the Wind and his heroic service in World War II, MGM struggled to find suitable roles for Gable that matched his star power and the media buzz surrounding him. This growing frustration with the studio reached a peak during the filming of Mogambo. From the moment Gable arrived on set, the production was fraught with problems. He had a contentious relationship with director John Ford, who not only mistreated Ava Gardner, but also publicly insulted Gable's appearance. Gable's own troubles were compounded by a painful infection that forced him to take a leave of absence. Despite these challenges, the set of Mogambo also saw its share of scandalous moments. On the set of Mogambo, Clark Gable was thrilled to discover that his much younger co-star, Grace Kelly, shared his passion for hunting. Their connection quickly evolved into an affair, and when the production moved to London, Gable arranged for them to have a hotel room where they could continue their relationship. But their romance was short-lived. Grace Kelly's mother arrived in London and gave her blessing to the relationship. Realizing he was in deeper than he had intended, Gable panicked and ended the affair, leaving Kelly heartbroken. It's hard to capture just how many hearts Gable left behind, and his romantic entanglements were far from over. Hollywood was undergoing rapid changes, and in 1951, MGM fired Gable's old boss, Louis B. Mayer. Although Gable had often clashed with Mayer, he was unsettled by the news and troubled by the diminishing roles coming his way. By 1954, after 23 years with MGM, Gable decided to leave the studio. While it was a necessary step, he never quite recaptured the peak success he had enjoyed earlier in his career. Yet, there was a glimmer of hope. In 1954, Gable rekindled a romance with Kay Williams, an old flame who had recently divorced her third husband. The two quickly fell for each other and eloped in Nevada with just a few close friends and family members present. This marriage was different from his previous ones. He seemed genuinely happy, reminiscent of his joy with Lombard. Still, it seemed that a fairy tale ending was elusive. When Clark Gable and Kay Williams attended one of his movie premieres in 1955, it was evident that Williams was pregnant. Tragically, she miscarried shortly afterward. Gable, who was a loving stepfather to her children, longed for one of his own, and the couple kept trying. In 1960, Williams became pregnant again, but their joy was short-lived. After leaving MGM, Gable's career hit a rough patch, with few standout performances, largely due to the lackluster quality of the films he was offered. However, there was one notable exception. In 1960, Gable took on a role in The Misfits, starring alongside Marilyn Monroe and Montgomery Clift. Though the film would eventually achieve iconic status, the journey to its completion was fraught with challenges. Filming The Misfits in the harsh desert heat was grueling. Despite his age, Gable insisted on performing his own stunts. The set was a hot spot for medical issues. Monroe, dealing with a divorce from the film's scriptwriter, and Clift, suffering from heart problems, both required constant medical attention. Ironically, they weren't the ones who would face the most severe health crisis. Just 2 days after wrapping up filming, Gable suffered a heart attack. There had been growing concerns about his health during production, as his voice had noticeably changed, and his insurance had only been approved after he quit smoking and drinking for a week. Gable ended up in the hospital, with his devoted wife by his side. At 59, his health took a sudden turn that no one had anticipated. At first, Clark Gable's condition seemed to be improving. One night, Kay Williams left his side to get some rest. A few hours later, a doctor woke her with the heart-wrenching news. Gable had passed away from a second heart attack. His body just couldn't withstand the strain. Williams was 4 months pregnant at the time. In March 1961, she gave birth to a son, whom she named John Clark, Gable's only child, a son he never had the chance to meet. As Gable had wished, he was buried next to the love of his life, Carole Lombard. Over 200 mourners attended his funeral, including an honor guard and notable figures like Spencer Tracy and James Stewart. Tributes began pouring in, but not all of them were respectful. After Gable's death, gossip columnist Luella Parsons spread a series of malicious rumors about his final days. Parsons alleged that Marilyn Monroe had caused so many issues and delays on set that Gable had become infuriated, even implying that Monroe was somehow responsible for his untimely death. This was far from the truth. Filming The Misfits had been incredibly difficult for Monroe, but Gable was a supportive presence. Monroe, nervous about working with him, had taken a tranquilizer the night before their first day on set. This made her late, but when she arrived, she apologized to Gable. He kindly reassured her, saying, "You're not late, honey," and took her aside to chat. For the rest of the shoot, Gable was a constant source of support for her, offering comfort during her tough times. Unfortunately, the cruel gossip eventually took its toll on her, and she ended up blaming herself for Gable's death. The Misfits turned out to be the final film for both actors. Monroe passed away in 1962 from an overdose. Though Gable didn't live to see The Misfits become a success, there was a small silver lining to the tragic timing of his heart attack. He did manage to watch a rough cut of the film before he died, and his reaction was deeply moving. Screenwriter Arthur Miller recalled that Gable said, "This is the best picture I have made, and it's the only time I've been able to act." Clark Gable was famously known in Hollywood for his womanizing, but after his death, many of his more troubling secrets emerged. During the early 1930s, while filming, Gable had fathered a child with his co-star, Loretta Young. The studio kept the affair under wraps, and Young went away for a few months, later claiming that she had adopted the child. Gable never acknowledged the daughter. Young only revealed the truth about her parentage to the girl after Gable had passed, adding a somber note to the story. Loretta Young passed away in 2000, and her daughter with Clark Gable, Judy Lewis, died of cancer in 2014. It was only after their deaths that Young's granddaughter-in-law disclosed a deeply troubling family secret. She revealed that Young had confided in her that her relationship with Gable had not been consensual, a truth Young had kept hidden for most of her life. The family chose to keep this secret until after both Young and Lewis were gone. Clark Gable was devastated by the tragic plane crash that killed Carol Lombard, but few know that he may have been indirectly involved in her death. At the time, Gable was working on a series of films with Lana Turner, and rumors of an affair between them started circulating. Fearing the scandal, Lombard decided to return to Los Angeles, but tragically, she never made it. Gable was heartbroken after Lombard's death and felt immense guilt, especially since she was traveling to see him when the accident occurred. Many believed that his decision to enlist in World War II was a way to seek redemption for his perceived role in Lombard's untimely death, with his risky behavior seen as a form of self-punishment. Clark Gable was often referred to as the King of Hollywood during his lifetime, and that title went with him to the grave. Many believe that with Gable's passing, the golden age of Hollywood ended as well,